right, let's get started. This is the Porter Community Meeting for February 24th, 2022. I'm Carolyn Van Slyke. Just a quick reminder, this meeting is recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. Um, since we have some new faces, would anyone like to say hi and introduce themselves and maybe share what you're doing with Porter? You don't have to if you don't want to, though.
Hey, I'm Nicholas. I haven't actually used Porter yet. I've been looking at it. I've been doing a bunch of work with deployment pipelines and at my company and trying to improve some developer experience stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
it seems like a really cool project. So I thought I'd drop by.
Yeah, no, it's great. I got really excited when I saw some of the things you were thinking about in your message to the CNAB channel. So, yeah, I'd love to chat about that today. Before we dive into dependencies, though, I wanted to give people a heads up on a couple things that are um, happening that we didn't quite plan for. And what I'm talking about is this. Um, we've been working on getting Porter approved for something called the Iron Bank Registry, which I didn't know what that was like before. I had to like 4 weeks ago. But we would like so that people who are concerned about running a secure Docker image of Porter that was built in an air gapped environment, and we're really sure what's in it and it hasn't been tampered with. Um, so, one of the things we did is we tweaked the Porter operators image so that it ran as not root, but a user called nonroot. There's nothing special about it. It's not root. Um, and what we quickly realized is that for the operator to work, the Porter Kubernetes operator, that if the bundle is running as one user, the agent that's running Porter inside of Kubernetes also needs to be running as that same user so that file permissions work. Um, so I am working on, and this is good, running running containers as not root is a really good security precaution. So I think this kind of is forcing us to take our medicine, so to speak. So I'm working on getting Porter such that by default, when you build a bundle, it won't run as root anymore. The Docker image that's generated when we build the bundle will also run as the same non-root user, which is kind of a big last minute change, but I think we always should have done this, to be honest. If anyone has concerns about that, let me know, because this will be going in very soon. Let's see if I can find that. I just want to link to the pull request if anyone's interested in looking at it and trying it out.
Yeah, I'll definitely want to give it a shot next week.
Okay.
I'm kind of heads down on other stuff this week, but this is very interesting to me, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, and as always, like if people have other thoughts about what would help make running Porter more secure, that is like one of the biggest focuses we have right now for our V1 milestone and release. Is we want to make sure that everything is secure as can be by default and that we're protecting data and we're not leaking anything. And also we're not, making ourselves vulnerable to all sorts of different security problems when we're running, Docker containers. So there's actually a label in our backlog. So if you just want to see what we're thinking about around security and what's kind of pending, use the security label and you will find them. Okay. I just want to give you a quick update on the Porter operator, the Kubernetes operator. The refactoring to switch out only being able to work with installations to being able to work with basically anything in Porter and be able to run it inside of Kubernetes. So like previously you could just do like porter install, upgrade, uninstall. With this change that I'm working on, any arbitrary porter command that you need to run in Kubernetes, we have like a new resource called AgentAction to assist with that. And it is just held up and waiting for this nonroot PR that I have open for Porter, because like I said, the operator is kind of what triggered realizing that we needed that work. So we're just going to hang out and wait until we have that. But again, there's a PR out there for the operator if anyone wants to see it and try it. I kind of have some like custom built bundles that run as nonroot, just to kind of test this out and make sure it works. So if you want to see where this is headed, here's the PR for it. Okay. Okay, now we can talk about dependencies. Real quick, I want to give people an update about what we're trying to do with it in the first place, because we had a prototype for dependencies in Porter and a draft in the CNAB spec for dependencies that pretty much was whatever Porter did for the most part. And what we're trying to do is, now that we've gathered a lot of feedback on what people really want, the advanced scenarios, like real use cases, we want to take another pass at it and make kind of some really big changes to it, and then be able to finalize what we think of as what the feature should be when it's feature complete. We have a proposal out there for Porter. So if we check this out, this is a proposal that's open for a while. And I'm updating it with kind of all the changes we've come up with in previous meetings and after working with the CNAB specification group. So you want to see like where things are going. This is the PR to follow. I'd like to get this merged real soon. With PEPs, the process we set up, like, to be honest, I haven't been following it, but I should, is that the point isn't to deliberate and get a perfect design in this PR. We should just bring the PEP in and have it be proposed, and anyone should be able to then submit tweaks, changes, improvements, questions, things to it. And then we just update a file in this repo, actually, when we're ready to say this is ready to implement. So I've kept this open way too long. So we're gonna get this merged. So we're not constantly pointing people at a PR to explain what we're doing with dependencies. On the CNAB side, our plan is we're not actually gonna do what we've done in the past, which is write a spec first and then have tools implement that. Porter's gonna lead and make sure that we've covered all our bases and found any gaps in what we're thinking. So we have like a rough idea and agreement on what we think will work at the CNAB level. And now what I'm doing is vetting this by putting out in a branch, a prototype of like how all of this plays out in Porter. Can we actually resolve a dependency graph with a whole bunch of different scenarios? And then build an execution plan and run it. So that's kind of where we are right now, is vetting it before we actually try to put any of it in the spec. Are there any questions just about the process and what we're going to be doing? Cool, everyone loves it. Great, I like hearing that. Absolute silence means you love it. So yeah, Nicholas, did you maybe want to share what you were hoping to do with dependencies? Because you seem to have a lot of neat ideas, and I wanted to get a feel for how that lines up to what we've already kind of laid down.
Yeah, so basically, I work with in a consultancy firm in Norway. So I've been in a few projects and seen a few different ways to deploy projects and for developers to work with the resources they have. And I've seen a lot of places where things break and people go around and get their different dependencies mixed up and deploy the same thing twice, get conflicts. So what I'm really interested in is really, this whole dependency graph, and also how can I make a good developer experience where you have that inner loop where you're local and can provision, for example, something for your local branch, for example, a feature branch. So you spin up your entire stack of the resources you need, or use ISO and respect that you, for example, add global resources that are shared, for example, instead of having a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people try to do it with local stack, for example. I do a lot of AWS stuff. And in those cases, you need, sometimes local stack isn't, the open source version doesn't have all the AWS features, and sometimes they're paid. And also running it all on your own machine might be taxing. I had an example once from my boss at the old company where he had a 32 core Xeon standing on his desk just to do local testing.
Yeah.
So I kind of I'm really interested in in those kinds of use cases, especially.
All right. Yeah, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. Some of the things that I picked up on that maybe we could chat about a bit is, one, you talked about accidentally creating duplicates of pieces of installations and things like that. Can you explain a little bit more what you were seeing, and then maybe I could help line that up with what we're thinking?
Yeah. So basically, for example, we do a lot of work with Terraform at my current customer, and one thing I've noticed a lot is naming conflicts where you can't spin the same resource up twice, right? Because you have the security groups have the same name, and these things are often solved with workspaces, but it's hard to fix without fixing the Terraform. It's kind of interdependent dependency in a way, for the lack of a better term. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself really well. I suggest ask.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm if I'm not being clear.
I mean, I am very well familiar with the naming conflict problem.
Yeah.
Are you running into it because, like, inside of all your Terraform modules and they depend on each other, that like the names are hard coded? Is that kind of what's happening?
Yeah, there's some not good practices there of them being hard coded, and there's also those things are Terraform specific things, but there's some things I see can be fixed really easily with, for example, the way Porter does it. For example, the current project I have, everyone are doing like application names, so you could easily like do an input variable and change the application name to like my application dash feature branch 5 or whatever have you. So having that automated is kind of the thing I started like looking at, and then I had a rabbit hole where I went down and like, oh yeah, here I need a acyclic graph and everything. And I thought somebody probably thought about this before me.
Yeah. With what we're planning with dependencies at the root level, so say you're installing whatever the application is, okay? You just have to pick a unique name for whatever it is. We do have namespaces, which I think is a little similar to workspaces with Terraform, so you can kind of segment a little bit. We don't really help name them uniquely.
So those namespaces aren't Kubernetes namespaces; they're Porter namespaces.
They're Porter namespaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
I took a look at it. A look at some of the documentation and got a bit confused at first.
Yeah. So Porter has an operator that we're slowly trying to build out, but Porter itself isn't,
Mm.
nothing about it is specific to Kubernetes, you know?
Yeah, cool.
So we just kind of borrowed namespaces
Yeah.
from Kubernetes just to help organize our own data so
Mhm.
that you could have one database full of all Porter stuff, right? And then be able to say, these installations are for Carolyn and she's messing around, or this is the dev environment, this is production, this is East, things like that. And you can kind
Mm.
of group them. And then Porter has some logic around resolving, for example, if it's looking for a credential set for your AWS creds,
Mhm.
it'll look first in its namespace and go,
Yeah.
is there one named, my AWS creds? And then if it doesn't find it, it'll go to the global or empty namespace and see if maybe we define a global set of creds for people to use.
Yeah.
So that helps a little bit with collisions and things like that.
Mhm.
But specific for dependencies, though, when it comes to like my bundle depends on a Postgres bundle, for example, all the
Yeah.
names are auto-generated and won't collide.
Cool. Yeah, because that's something I realized I talked a bit around dependencies at first there when you read it and started talking about it, because the dependencies part is also, we have a few repos where, for example, central thing doing authentication in some cases, and that defines some Terraform that makes sure that you have an app client for your OAuth things. And in that case, maybe having a reference on commit, for example, commit message, no, not commit message, commit ref, for example, is something I started looking at a bit as well.
I'm not quite following the commit stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, instead of doing, I see in the spec that you did versions, for example, like similar. So in some cases, we use just the commit hash instead of the version.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's easier for people to quickly get up and running with.
Yeah. Just to clarify with bundles, like
Yeah.
Porter encourages you to set a version, right?
Mhm.
But when you're just like referencing the bundles, you can actually set whatever you want for the tag. So if you wanted to tag it based off of SHA or something like that,
Yeah, cool.
you can totally do that. It's just somewhere the bundle needs to know what version it is, but that doesn't need to be like its unique identifier in any way. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just sorry for if it's a stupid question. It's just a OCI tag, right? Like OCI image tag.
There's we do support OCI registries only, not just like OG Docker, and we do have a list on the website that kind of lays out what we've tested and what works. We store a little bit more than the image. We also create a manifest list, and it has a bunch of metadata about the bundle and what's inside and its capabilities and all sorts of stuff like that. And then any associated images. So like say you're using a Helm chart and that references 6 images. Those images are actually also in the registry stored with the bundle. So it can kind of be moved around as a single unit.
Yeah, I think I saw this from one of your talks at a DockerCon or DeepCon or something. I can't quite remember. But I think I saw you talk about it once.
Probably.
Yeah.
I talk about Porter every chance I get for the past couple of years. So yeah, let's talk about maybe some of the other things. Like, I think you mentioned overrides. Did I catch that right? Or
let's see. Let me find my message real quick. Where's the overrides? Oh, sorry.
oh, did you find it?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
maybe it's not relevant. I just wanted to bring up that one of the plans for dependencies is that, say you depend upon a database, right? And it needs to be Postgres, but you don't really care how it's provisioned, what infrastructure it's running on. You'll be able to swap it out. So if you're doing dev, right, in your local development, you could manually set it to maybe a Postgres database you just have running on your laptop, or an instance of like an in-memory database that's running in like your local Minikube or cluster or something like that. Because the other thing that Porter does when it resolves the dependency graph is it allows you to resolve existing things. And I think you saw that with like shared dependencies, where like I could make a database at the global level, and if someone needs a database and the criteria matches, it'll just be picked up and reused instead of installing 4, 5, 6 n instances of a database.
Yeah. Cool.
And then the other thing you mentioned was the dev loop. I was really curious how you saw the dev loop being improved by this. I wasn't quite sure what you were kind of envisioning.
I haven't like played too much around with it, but my overall idea was more or less a lot of the problems I've seen, especially where I'm at right now, is having to wait for you write a bunch of code, you commit, then you open up, then you go into GitHub, you see, oh, it failed. Why did it fail? Go in there. So it's a lot of steps to just see that it failed. So getting it closer to, for example, just doing, what is it again, Porter install on your local machine instead, and being able to run that on a test cluster, test account in AWS, in Azure, in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. It seems like, that's basically what the tool does by itself.
I would say that we're part of the way towards making that better, but we're not all the way. Like, so for example, the Porter operator deploys itself with a bundle, actually, which makes it easier on me because it has complex configuration and setup required. We have to make like a bunch of resources and a database for it and everything. But the part where like we're lacking a little bit is when you're developing, say there's like, we'll say there's 10 steps during install. Okay. And then, your 10th step, you're having trouble and it's failing when you run it and you're not sure why. When you repeat running the bundle, it's kind of up to how well you wrote the bundle, to be honest, but Porter is going to execute all the preceding 9 steps and then get back to 10. A good step will detect quickly that it's already been run and it's in its desired state, and we'll just move on to the next one and not do anything, but there's still that kind of time and repetition. One thing that's in my mental backlog, but actually isn't documented anywhere at the moment, but it was a big ask actually from one of our users, Ralph Scolacci, which is the ability to say, pick up where I left off. I already ran 1 through 9, just start at 10, and then be able to open it up in somewhat of a debugger, so you can see the state of the bundle, what all your variables are set to, see what the output values actually were, and just kind of walk through your bundle. I'm like, okay, run step 1, see how it looks. Okay, now go into step 2, see everything, maybe even jump into the container quick, poke around, see what's going on. So we're trying to set ourselves up for that, which would dramatically help improve the dev loop when you're trying to write a deployment. But we're not there yet. So
because I can I just looked through my notes as well when you were talking, because I've been doing a lot of searching and Googling. There's this tool called Garden that I found that kind of also matched a bit what I was thinking the problem is. It's Kubernetes specific. A lot of what I do is not within Kubernetes. So it's a Kubernetes operator. And that seems like it has the same kind of development loop that I initially had a mental model about, like a mental note, just like you mentioned. Let's see if I can find. They had a really cool example somewhere.
Yeah, if you find, oh, there we go. Garden, huh? Well, I mean, I like their pictures already.
Yeah. Let's see, on their GitHub page, they have a, if you go on their GitHub page, they have a really cool, like a GIF.
Okay, cool, cool. I may have to take a look at this. I'm always open and looking for like patterns or solutions that people have figured out elsewhere that can help us out. I just want to be upfront with like, you were talking about improving the dev loop, and
Yeah.
you know, it helps a bit, right?
Mhm.
Because you can swap in your own credentials and try it out locally and do all sorts of stuff like that. But it's not as smart as it
Yeah.
could be. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I know it's really hard to do right.
Yeah.
And the cool thing
Um,
about this is it seemed to like have a active when you ran it locally, and it knew whenever you changed one component and reloaded that, which, or if you had like an upstream component, it looked like it would redeploy the other ones because they needed to know about the new change.
yeah.
And they used the graph in that way, which I thought was really nifty.
So that brings up what I was really hoping we could talk about today. You know, we've really been looking at the install scenario,
Mhm.
right? Like we've created a graph. This is all everything that needs to be done. We execute it. We have a bunch of now associated installations, right? But there's all sorts of questions that come up. Like one, just being able to visualize it and see what the heck did it just do? What did it install? What relies on what? If you look at any single installation, like, is there any extra things we want to be able to make visible to people about it depends on certain things?
Mhm.
But the other piece I think that you were kind of mentioning there is like, how do I work with this as a unit, and should I work with them as a unit? And I think, I don't know if it was Steven or maybe Jeremy was talking about like, if I do an upgrade, do I upgrade every single node in the graph, every bundle, or is it just some? Like, just because you
Yeah.
depend on something doesn't mean you move in lockstep with it. So these are kind of things that I'm hoping, if people have concrete use cases for like, here's a bundle that has dependencies, and in this case I would want them to upgrade together. Here's another bundle where maybe that's not the case, because I'm hoping we can identify some patterns and like maybe a couple different use cases people have, so that we can help Porter like give you more tools for kind of managing it after you've installed. Like, we've
Mhm.
made it really easy to install 20 things at once, but we haven't yet made it easy to then manage that mess you just deployed out. I don't know, Stephen, I think, were you saying that you had more dependency use cases that you were kind of building out?
Yeah, right now we're trying to figure out what those look like. So it's like being able to easily identify dependency parameters that are required, passing outputs from one dependency to another. I know we've talked about
Yeah.
all of this stuff in the past. You know, that's the passing outputs is really big, from one
Yeah.
dependency to another. And then also just being able to inspect, and and I think this will help when we get interfaces implemented, but saying, hey, all of these dependencies need these inputs or these credential sets, or whatever that is.
One thing that I noticed about what you were describing here, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. The plan for dependencies is that, say you're installing the root bundle, and it may have a pretty deep tree underneath it of dependencies. The user at the root doesn't get to pass things in explicitly to a single dependency, like a parameter or a credential. The way we have it right now is that um, any bundle that takes a dependency on something else is responsible for collecting information necessary that's required by its dependency. So let's say, for example, that one of my dependencies needs a kube config. Okay. It's on me to somehow get that to my dependency. So that may mean I need to have a credential for a kube config, right? And then that kind of bubbles its way up the tree. So eventually at the root level, either you had to have run something that made a kube config for you at some point and then, passed it in to whoever needed it, or ultimately the root bundle is going to need to expose a credential that asks for a kube config. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think so our use case is going to be like a single shared Porter operator running that exposes, so I'm thinking ultimately what I would like to see, in 2 years' time is the ability to dynamically define what a multiple dependency runtime would look like, where it's like using interfaces and all that. I want to say I want to create a cluster, and then that is an individual Porter bundle, but I want to also install various services on top of that cluster. So like, let's say I want AgentAction service mesh running. I want to hook into Datadog. So these are things that I can post using interfaces. I can construct more at runtime what this looks like. And I'll need to be able to say the kube config from this cluster needs to be given to the Porter bundle for this Datadog installation stuff. And then I want to, throw it on some Edge 2.0 service and like basically be able to construct some of these dynamically and figure out how dependency resolution happens there.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. That makes more sense. That is what needs to happen right now. Is this. That's I'm calling that the execution plan of understanding that one of my dependencies creates something useful and output like a kube config or a connection string. And then the execution plan includes not only what bundles to run, but how to pass inputs and outputs between the graph of bundles.
Right.
So that they have all the information they need and we know we can satisfy any required parameters, credentials, things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's happening much sooner than the 2-year plan.
Well, and I'm thinking, again, I've got this dynamic Porter bundle where you can basically click through and say, I want to run this bundle and this bundle and this bundle, and it can construct something at runtime for you that will define that whole stack. But that's pie in the sky at this point. I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, yeah. Right now we're just at, I want to run one bundle.
Yes.
I'll figure out what its dependencies are, maybe resolving it using interfaces, using existing installations, allowing me to swap something out and override what bundle to use.
Yeah. So with that, like the use case for that right now that I have is, I want to spin up a cluster in one bundle, and then I want to take the kube config from that and pass it into another dependent bundle so that I can have a single bundle with multiple dependencies and be able to talk between dependencies. So like that's my today use case. And we're having to kind of come up with a workaround for that, where right now, really it's just, save off the kube config. I'm running into some issues trying to pass the kube config in as a parameter, but that might just be, I haven't spent time trying to figure out, multi-line and all that stuff. That could be something I'm running into. So
if you're trying to pass data in, use the file type for parameter. Okay. And if you're not using the file type, you want base 64 encoded strings to represent the contents. Yeah,
that's where what we're gonna have to. So because we're running this as again the shared Porter platform from the operator, so we don't really have files because this is all running on the Porter operator, and we're not running Porter commands directly. We're using the message bus to get these messages that tell us what bundles to run and with what parameters, and then we're constructing the installation CRD and laying that down in the operator. So it's a slightly different use case, probably than the mainstream porter. But yeah, we need to figure out the base 64 side of things.
Okay, yeah. The other thing to look out for, or I just want you to be aware of, is that in the new refactoring here for AgentAction, this may or may not be useful to you, but you can give it files that it should drop into the agent and be able to use. So if you have a representation of the file, right, you can just give it to Porter like this, and it'll handle making it a file and then allowing you to just work with it as a file. So that if you have files, you could drop them into the agent and then reference them in your commands, reference them in your credential set, parameter set, you know?
Yep.
That may be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you find that like we have a gap, I'm gonna look at this a little bit more with the file type and see if there's more opportunities to make this a little less janky. I agree, like files right now with the operator don't feel very natural.
Yeah, well, and again, like I don't want to derail what you want to accomplish with Porter based off our use case, because it is a very kind of unique. Like we're looking to have a catalog of Porter bundles that our shared Porter instance is going to essentially allow self-service deployment into a managed cloud of our catalog items, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole use case for us is, and it's
this is a use case for Porter. This is like Microsoft is doing something very similar.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So don't worry about it. Like my goal with the operator is that you should be able to do all the core use cases of the Porter CLI. If you can do it with the CLI, there should be some way to do it with the operator as well. Because the operator is really targeting automating Porter, doing Git ops and, like automated like Git-based workflows with Porter. And, we're just taking advantage of a lot of existing infrastructure that's in Kubernetes to make this easy. A lot of people already have this in their environments, so we can kind of tack on to it and be like, well, here's an operator now, add on Flux and you're all set. So don't worry. Like, I'm not like specifically supporting you. These are things we want in general,
Yeah. Well, the operator is definitely key for us too. That's the best way for us to set this up.
Okay. Have you thought at all about the concept of what happens during upgrade for an entire dependency graph yet? Has anyone kind of started putting together use cases for what they think they'd like to see happen for different types of bundles?
We've thought about that from a Terraform standpoint, but not specifically from a Porter standpoint, because again, from a self-service managed infrastructure where you're just exposing, infrastructure offerings, the upgrade thing is can be difficult, because especially if you're using Terraform, you can run into some issues where, like if you have a database, right, you're deploying a database with Terraform, sometimes upgrades redeploy. So I'm not sure how we're going to handle being able to say, this set of infrastructure needs to be upgraded, but we don't want to lose any of the data during that upgrade. That's kind of an overarching, not Porter specific issue.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to figure that out, because if we're managing people's infrastructure for them, they shouldn't upgrade and lose all their, database content or something like that.
Yeah. I'm writing notes on that, because I think I could generalize this to upgrading of stateful deployments, essentially, is kind of like the concern. And making sure that Porter is encouraging people to do this in a way that we're not losing data, right? Yep. But then also making it really clear to the user through things like dry runs, or like looking at what the execution plan is to see what it's going to do to my database,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to capture that. All right. Yeah, so if people think more about that, like that's something that I don't think we have enough information to move forward on for designs at all. The concept of I've installed a bundle and all its dependencies. What do I do now? You know, how do I move forward with that and manage it properly? So just over the coming weeks, like if you think of something, you know, please like bring that feedback back to me. We sorely need it. You know, we're not quite sure what people are hoping to be able to do, you know, and how opinionated Porter could be, or if we need to be just extremely customizable, essentially, you know, to let people do whatever makes sense for each scenario, you know. But I'm hoping we can find like one or two use cases that we think would be common or a best practice for people to follow. Just in general, Porter tries to do that instead of being like having a million toggles, which is really complicated to use. So that's what we're thinking about. Did anyone else have things they want to chat about today in our meeting?
Yeah. Hi, Carolyn. Sorry. I know I've been very quiet on the dependencies. We're just not quite there in terms of figuring out our use cases. But I was wondering where we have a couple of problems with Porter publish and build to a local registry. We're using Harbor, and the Porter build. I know I see there was an issue. I just found that a few days ago with the Porter build honoring an HTTP proxy and no proxy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to be honoring those. So you have to kind of work around that in the Docker file. And the other thing is we have certificates and logging credentials for our registry. And again, Porter publish doesn't seem to be picking those up from the Docker.
Yeah, let me make sure I'm finding
config.
exactly which ones you're talking about. You're talking about this one?
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's the one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. So are you trying to access things through the proxy during Porter builds, like you need to pull in a private repo and things like that? Or are you talking about
Yeah, I
during
mean, basically our
publish?
Porter build is not
Okay.
working because
All right. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just making sure I got this right so that we can tack onto an existing issue. Yeah. We just have a PR coming through that's adding support for custom arguments being passed into build, you know? So that you'll be able to pass in build arguments and provide extra information. But it sounds like maybe there's an environment variable specifically we're not respecting that you were hoping would have just been picked up and used.
Yeah, it seems like that. But I mean, if you do a Docker build, usually behind you've got a in your Docker config nowadays, that's the preferred way to add a proxy configuration. And it just appears that is not being picked up by Porter. So I think if it somehow read the Docker whatever it's doing behind the scenes to replicate that Docker environment through the Docker config.
I bet that's what we're missing. I know that we like load environment variables and kind of pay attention to things like Docker network and stuff like that, but we may not be invoking Docker because we're not using like the CLI, right? We're just using the libraries directly. We may be missing
I when I get time, I can look into that and I'll try and fix it. And likewise, the Porter publish, we're getting an error coming back with some OAuth token And that, I believe, might be to do with we have our own CA
Okay.
to access Harbor, our Harbor registry. And so even if you have installed the certificates on your host machine, that portal publish doesn't seem to be, you know, and again, if you
I
do a
totally
Docker
get it.
publish, it will honor that. It will
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open an issue for the publish problem. I don't think we have an existing one on that right now. Yeah. Again, I think we're just maybe missing a little bit of extra config to pick up Dockers.
Yeah.
Not just environment variables, but config files. Or
Yeah.
picking up all of the certs that the system supports as opposed to just pre-configured certs.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Sorry it's not working.
Yeah, no, that's all right. We can work around it for now.
Okay. Is there anything else people wanted to bring up for today's meeting before we close? All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you joining today.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.